welcome back to the Valley to Peak Nutrition Podcast. This is going to be a recap of a lot of the recent events and travel that we have done throughout January and February. And for those who aren't familiar, January and February are some of the major show seasons for the outdoor and hunting industry. What's unique and interesting about what we do and why we would show up to these, because we don't actually have a booth, is a couple of things. One is our partnership with Mountain Tough and the nutrition that we do there, and two events that they had during these shows, one called Tough Sheep, one called Tough Buck, both of which are really set up as a way to give back to conservation to the Wild Sheep Foundation for Tough Sheep and the Mule Deer Foundation for Tough Buck. And so through both of those, through these different events that they put on, they raised over 100,000 for each foundation as a method of conservation for each of those species. So that's pretty substantial. And so you might be wondering, okay, well, what does this have to do with a podcast, and why do you need to do a podcast to talk about that? The answer is because of two things. Number one, a lot of people saw what was going on, but really didn't know what was going on. And so there have been quite a few follow-up questions about, what is it? And there's always a degree of ambiguity to those events, and people are nervous about them. So I thought it would be a good chance for us to cover what those events were. And maybe more importantly, how do you fuel for something like that if you have an early morning event, or if there are different waves or tiers in which you are prepared to start? We'll talk about this when we look at each of those events themselves. How do you fuel for something like that? And what's great about that is, even if you never plan on doing an event like Tough Sheep, Tough Buck, Tough Fest, or High Rocks, or CrossFit competition, anything, right? They all kind of fall into the same category. If you never plan on doing one of those, how does it translate into, what does it mean for other events that you may be doing, a hike or a run or an ultra or whatever? So I wanted to kind of review that as well. Number two thing that I wanted to cover is that, man, it was so great to meet so many of you. And hands down, the number one comment that I heard at both of those events in Reno and Salt Lake was how much you love this, you love the podcast, and that means so much. But also, many of you had shared with me, what you've done through this podcast, which is just amazing and warms my heart to hear. And one person had one particular comment where they said, they had accomplished something that they'd been working towards. He kind of downplayed that accomplishment, but I want to chat about that as well, and then kind of recap the shows too. So hopefully you enjoy this and can take something from it. First and foremost, I want to cover this nutrition topic about both Tough Sheep and Tough Buck. And there was some differences between the events themselves, but both of them, were designed to where most people could finish them in under an hour. And really the earmark of them was to be about 40 to 45 minutes long or so. And they were both a circuit style workout that combined a lot of different movements that were challenging in their nature and designed to be built around hunting. So a lot of single leg movement and lunges and over and under these beams that we had set up, as well as carrying a lot of heavy weight up and down stairs. And all of them, again, designed to be in under an hour or less. What was interesting, and what makes the fueling element of this really hard, is that they had different waves. And so they had a wave go off every 15 minutes from 8 a.m. until noon. So that's 4 waves per hour. That's 4 hours long. So if you do the math on that, you're looking at 16 potential waves. Now, that's not a huge problem if you've got a fueling strategy and your wave is at 8 a.m. But if your wave is at 10 or 11 or noon or any of those, it becomes harder to know, when do you eat for something like that. And I don't want to belabor this and make this a bigger deal than what it is, but I do want to give you a couple of just general basic rules of thumb to remember so that you can navigate this if you ever find yourself there in the future. And that is this: for the most part, if you have 3 to 4 hours between the point that you eat until the point that your event plans to start, whether that's leaving a trailhead, whether that is a sanctioned race of some kind, whether that is an event like High Rocks, Tough Sheep, Tough Buck, a CrossFit event, or anything. If you have 3 to 4 hours, the general rule of thumb is that you can tolerate a full meal. And what that means is a meal that has a combination of proteins, carbohydrates, fats, fiber. It's like there are no rules as far as what you can handle. And that's the best case scenario because you get a mix of different foods and you can actually feel like you have had, something to eat. If that window narrows down to 1 to 2 hours from the point that you eat until the point that you begin or plan to begin whatever the event is that you're participating in, at that point, you want to really limit protein, you want to really limit fiber, and you want to really limit fat. Those three constituent pieces of nutrition delay digestion in the stomach. And what that means is that when those three things are there, proteins, fats, and fiber, it takes the stomach a longer time to process. There's two problems with that when you're talking about an event like this. Problem number one is it really puts a delay on the time that it takes for that food that you've eaten to be converted into actual fuel that is now deposited into your muscle so that you can use it when the event starts. That's the whole reason to eat before something like this, right? Is so that you top off those nutrition stores. But if you are delaying that time, then it may not be deposited in the muscle by the time that you start. Number two is when you combine that with the nerves that most people feel before an event like this, it creates a ton of problems in the gut itself. And food usually is still sitting there once you start the event, which, as you could imagine, is kind of worst case scenario. So what you want to focus on are things that you know are going to sit good with you. Now that historically has always been promoted as carbohydrates, like a slice of toast with a little bit of peanut butter and honey on top of it, as an example. But that could also mean something entirely different. If you know that nuts sit really well with you ahead of time, or if you know that a piece of fruit sits well with you ahead of time, or if you notice there's any variety of different things that could be there. But you want to choose something that's going to be sit fairly well with you. Now, in terms of the macronutrients of that meal, if the intensity of this event you're planning to do is high, I would steer more towards carbs. If the intensity of this event that you're planning to do is low, which I can't really imagine many events that you're doing where it's not requiring some intensity, then you don't necessarily have to steer towards carbs. It doesn't mean I would discourage you from doing it. It just means that you don't necessarily need to either. So you've got a lot of preference there, but as the intensity climbs, the preferential fuel source of the muscle becomes carbohydrate. So you're going to want to fill that need if you've got any reasonable expectation of yourself during this event. Now, going down to an hour or less, an hour before the event. So if your wave was at 10 a.m., let's say you wanted something at 9 a.m., at that point, you want something very easy to digest, almost like a liquid source of carbohydrate. That could range from juice to a, specialty carbohydrate mix of some kind. We just did a podcast episode a couple weeks ago on the different carb mixes. There's a guide in those show notes that you can download for free. Anything that's listed in there could fit the bill. But you got a variety of things. The theme of the story there is liquid carbohydrates are going to be almost immediate fuel sources, especially for the brain. And so if you take something less than an hour, there's no fiber, there's no fat, there's no protein. The gut has no problems processing that carbohydrate. And so the delivery to the muscle and the brain is much faster than actual foods. 3 to 4 hours ahead of time, whole meal. 1 to 2 hours ahead of time, mostly carbohydrate, but you're not going to want a lot of fat, fiber, and protein. Less than an hour, liquid carbohydrates. So again, if your wave is at 10 or 10:30, you may wake up at 6 Eat a full breakfast, a couple of eggs, a bowl of oats, a glass of juice, pieces of fruit, some yogurt and granola, bowl of cereal, whatever. You can tolerate a whole meal. But as it gets closer to 10 a.m., if your wave is at 11, I would probably then top my nutrition stores in the muscle, my glycogen stores, my carbohydrate stores off with a glass of orange juice. 8-ounce glass of orange juice is 30 grams of carbohydrate, and it's plenty to just stop those stores and make sure that you're ready to go for whenever your wave begins. So, hopefully, that gives you some general basic rules of thumb that you can apply and in any event that you're actually doing. And so, as far as I know, they definitely do plan on doing both of those events next year. There's another chance for you to do what's known as Tough Fest in June in Bozeman. That's a lot of fun. It's a really cool environment where everybody's just working towards a goal together. There is some suffering involved, and that's always a good time. So it'd be a good chance for you to be a part of that as well if you were interested in it. I just want to say too how tremendous it was to be a part of both of those events and to volunteer and to really publicly say thank you to the group at Mountain Tough, what they're doing over there. So if you're new to them, maybe you've never heard of them, you can check them out. We'll put a link in the show notes to them, and we would love to see you at some of the events that we do in the future. The shows themselves were good. When I knew that I was going to do this podcast, I thought, well, it might be kind of cool because most people I know that are into the outdoors in any way, shape, or form are also into the gear. But to be honest, I wasn't really that wowed by any of the gear that I saw at the show. Now, with exception to two things, which one of those was the Rough Ridge stove, which is a titanium based stove that has decent efficiency in terms of fuel. And so to this point, I've used two things. I've used a jet boil with a regulator on it. It's kind of heavy, but it works pretty well. And then I have also used a lighter setup if I need to pack in somewhere, which is a titanium cup combined with the old school MSR pocket rocket. And it's also worked fine. The problem is like none of it really goes great together. You kind of always have this yard sale when you're setting stuff out, and it just doesn't work as I've always wanted this all-in-one system. And Jetboil used to make a titanium version of their basic stove, but they stopped making it years ago, and I've just been waiting on someone to capitalize on that gap in the market, and the two brothers over at Rough Ridge Stoves have done that. And so they had their stove at the Hunt Expo. They were offering it on pre-sale. It was $249 if I remember right. And the stats on it were very, very impressive, and they definitely have put in deep thought into the product. And so I think if you're interested in something like that, I'll link that in the show notes as well. But I think if you look at it, you'll see that it's definitely had some thought to it. And it was very thoughtful as well, just in terms of how they shaped it to the markings inside, so you knew how much water there actually was, and it's in ounces rather than mils, and so on and so forth. So I was pretty impressed by that. And then the other, which was kind of tucked behind closed doors, and they've talked about quite a bit, where our good friends over at Exo Mountain Gear had their K4X at the show, and that's impressive. It's not out yet, but it will be soon, and it's pretty sweet. So keep your eyes on that as well. If I could, I would link it, but I can't because it's not out. So all of those things were definitely cool. There were a pile of different supplement companies all promoting their almost all of them have two flavors, right? Which are a hydration mix and a caffeinated pre-workout insert all of your different adjectives mix as well. And they all came in a variety of their different flavors. They were all circulating in the same containers. They were all et cetera, et cetera. Now, I'm not going to call any of them out individually, but I will say that they are all basically doing the same thing, which is ordering in bulk from a specific supplier. They are mixing their ingredients in-house, and they are all one and the same. So I'm not even going to go down the rabbit hole of saying whether or not you should take these, but I will say don't get too wrapped up in your own research and trying to figure out who's better. I will save you a very long rabbit hole dive and say they're all the same. Pick the one that you like, pick the one you like the flavor of, pick the team that you like, whatever, buy it and know that you are not missing anything by going to another brand. Now, I will say that although that is true, there were some that had higher concentrations of sodium, which you do want in those products if you're in a situation whenever you are sweating a lot. So you want to pay attention to that. Some of them have varying carb mixes, some have absolutely none, which does nothing for you if you're trying to use it for fueling. And then some have kind of the intermediate dose, which is right in the middle. And I didn't really see any that had the correct amount of carbohydrates in it that you would want, which, like we've always talked about, can be found from, the least expensive thing on the market, which is a Tang, to middle of the line Gatorade, to high of the line Bougie with like Scratch Labs, Tailwind, etc. You can kind of pick your poison, but it's important to know, and I think that this is the general takeaway when it comes to supplements. You need to know what you're looking for in a product. If you are taking a product but you have no clue why you're taking it or what it's supposed to do, it's really difficult to make informed decisions on your purchases. So you could be buying something that a company says does X, Y, and Z, and it does none of that. Absolutely none of it. So you need to know. It's very important to know when you go to purchase a supplement what benefit am I expecting to get from this, what benefit should this product elicit to me, what dose does it need to be in, what form does that need to be in, and does this product have it? How much salt do I need? Does this have it? How many carbohydrates do I need? What are the forms of carbohydrate? We've talked extensively about there being different forms, and those different forms of carbohydrate matter in terms of refilling the muscle. So if you're going to go down and spend your money on supplements because you believe that there is a benefit in doing so, it's really important that you know what you're looking for, why, and if that product has it or not, so that you can be, actually purchasing something that gives you a fighting chance at even feeling, what it is that you feel like you should be feeling. Third and last, I kind of said this in the beginning, but I really want to say just thank you for all of you who stopped and said hello, who said that you listened to the episodes on here, who said that you love Lindsay. That means a lot. Like his podcast continue to grow, and it seems like everyone who has an internet connection has a podcast. It's not lost on me. It's not lost on Lindsay that means you could listen to anyone. And it's really humbling to us to know that you pick us to be in that rotation, because you certainly could fill that whole playlist with a variety of other people. So thank you for taking the time to say hi. Thank you for listening every week that you do. Thank you for the comments and the questions that you write in. I mean, that more than anything means so much to us. I was stopped by a gentleman there who said, "Hey, I recently lost 30 pounds, and his ultimate goal was much higher than that. And he sort of downplayed the fact of what he had lost, which was 30 pounds." And I said this to him because he was so taken back by the fact that I had lost, 140 pounds. Wow, I can't imagine that. I'm only at 30 and I've got 70 more to go. When he said that, I told him, and maybe this will be encouraging to someone else that's listening. I said, don't forget that even though 140 pounds sounds really big and really grand and really significant, at one point I was only 30 in as well. At one point I had only lost 15. At one point I had only lost 5. At one point I had only lost 10. And the only thing that separated me from being that that guy that lost 30 and me who had lost 140 was time. And so if you consistently put in the effort and the work and the system that you had built to lose those 30, it is only time until yours grows to the number that you want it to be. And the same is true on the opposite end of that. If there are changes in your performance or your training or your aesthetics or your insert whatever goal it is that you have. It is only a matter of time with your system until you reach that endpoint, but do not let something that seems so small discourage you from continuing to be consistent, because everyone that you see who is at a certain point you want to be at was only, quote unquote, only as far as you at 1.2. They just didn't quit. So hopefully that encourages you. Thank you, as always, for listening. If you have any questions about anything that I have said today, you can email me. If you have questions that you want us to cover, you can email me. That is info@v2pnutrition.com. We would be happy to cover those things. So we'll be back again with several new episodes throughout the course of the year. If you've got any questions, send them over. We'll talk to you soon in a couple of weeks.